السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. لعل الرئيس الأمريكي جو بايدن سيفرض عقوبات جديدة على روسيا. المزيد من تهديدات واشنطن بفرض عقوبات هي محاولة لإكراه أوروبا على التخلي عن مشروع خط أنابيب الغاز نوردستريم 2 بحسب الخبراء. لكن يعتقد هؤلاء أن الولايات المتحدة لن تكون قادرة على وقف بناء خط أنابيب الغاز، لأن الاتحاد الأوروبي يدرك أهميته بالنسبة لأمن الطاقة في أوروبا. المتحدث باسم الكرملين ديمتري بيسكوف أكد أن الدول الشريكة في المشروع متسقة في عزمها على استكماله، والذي بحسب المحللين سيكتمل على الأرجح خلال هذا العام. هذا المشروع مهم لألمانيا لأن التكلفة المنخفضة للغاز الروسي تزيد من كفاءة الصناعة الألمانية، وسيمكن تنفيذ مشروع نوردستريم 2 ألمانيا من أن تصبح أكبر مركز للغاز في أوروبا، وسيوفر فرصة للتحكم في حالة الأسعار في سوق الوقود، بيد أن دون هذا الأمر عقبات وعقوبات وضغوطات وإرباكات وقيود أمريكية متعددة. وفي مثل هذه الحالة من الصعب جدا اختلاق عقوبات لا تؤدي في الوقت نفسه إلى تدهور كبير في العلاقات الأمريكية الألمانية، ويمكن أن توقف أو تؤخر بشكل ملحوظ وملموس استكمال خط الأنابيب. لقراءة أعمق في الموقف الألماني والعلاقة مع روسيا، ولا سيما في ظل طبول تقرع لاحتمالية فتح جبهة قديمة جديدة بين أوكرانيا وروسيا والمخاطر الجيوسياسية، يطيب لنا أن نستقبل من برلين الصحفي الألماني مانويل أوكزنرايتر مدير المركز الألماني للدراسات الأوراسية. أهلا بكم إلى حلقة جديدة من الداخل. معكم زينب صفار، تابعونا. Manoel Oxenreiter, German journalist, director of the German Center for Eurasian Studies. Welcome to الداخل from the inside, Manuel.
Thank you so much. Great to be here again. Thank you.
Pure pleasure to have you always. Well, to start, Manuel, observers note that Russia is piling up troops where large Russian military movements towards the eastern Ukraine border and into Crimea are reported, and the US and NATO are piling up troops at the borders of the European part of Russia, particularly in the Baltic and Black Sea region. Is Russia going to war with Ukraine? Is it saber rattling or preparations for war?
I would say first that with all my respect, we ask this question in the wrong way. Russia is relocating troops on its own territory, and it has, as any countries in the world, all the right to locate and relocate troops and military units on its own territory wherever it wants, and it doesn't mean at the same time that there is any aggression planned. What we see on the other side is that, as you mentioned, NATO is planning, beginning in April, a huge exercise called Defender 21, right at very close to the western border of Russia at the Black Sea, including 26 nations with more than 30,000 troops. And if we look at the situation, we can say Russia is a regional power, but the United States, again, with all my respect, they are not a regional power. They are from North America and they are planning here. So we have indeed a very dangerous situation which goes along the Ukrainian politics right now, because since we see, just as a last sentence, since we see that Ukraine feels backed again by the United States, precisely since Joe Biden with his administration moved into the White House and moved into the positions in Washington, Ukraine all of the sudden seems to feel very strong. We see in Donbass a lot of provocations at the contact line coming from the Ukrainian side. So this is quite a dangerous situation right now. And of course, including two superpowers concentrating military units very close to each other. That is true.
Well, Russia has made plain its own red line for US, EU and NATO to take notice. Russia will be forced to protect the residents of Donbass if Ukraine launches full-scale hostilities against the region. Should such circumstances occur, Manuel, it is probable that both the US and NATO eventually would be pulled in to the conflict too. Is it possible that a crisis in Ukraine entangling Moscow might suit the US at this time? And why do we actually sense that the Biden administration is pushing Ukraine to attack Russia? Why is it adamant on ramping up pressure on Moscow?
The experiences of the last decades show very well that the United States has the tendency to give their close allies huge promises in case they go into a conflict with the Russian Federation. I want to give as one example Georgia. I think in 2008, the United States were encouraging fiercely Georgia to go on war against the Russian Federation. That was while the Olympic Games took place. Georgia went into a war, but not like Georgia expected the United States protected them or even enforced them. No, what happened was that the United States were withdrawing their soldiers from Georgia. We have to see the United States are not ready to sacrifice right now their men for any Eastern European state, but it is part of their politics to keep Russia in a non-stop, well, I would say, mobilization situation, which makes Russia look always, also in Western media, don't forget that media, information war is now a very, very important factor.
Yes, the hybrid warfare,
Absolutely,
sure.
Absolutely. So to make Russia look like a state non-stop in mobilization, non-stop training its defense capacities, non-stop preparing for whatever, making parades, showing rockets and so on, that is one of the senses, to make Russia look like an aggressor, while the United States are encouraging, motivating other countries to step into this trap. Right now, the United States are trying to trap the Ukrainians, and it looks like, or as it always did, a weak country, a failed state.
But also, Manuel, the Ukrainians are trying to pull the legs of the NATO because they want to get into the NATO, and still this matter is pending.
That is what we are told.
And maybe also because of the president of Ukraine's opinion polls are just going way down to what is expected, and because of the economic situation, the deteriorating economic situation in Ukraine.
That, by the way, that comes with the office. You cannot be Ukrainian president and be popular at the same time, because it's not even in your hands. I mean, you can think about President Zelensky, whatever you want, but he has the burden of a failed state. He didn't come into a functioning system. He has just to manage. No, he took over a failed state as a president, and he cannot be popular because in this position you simply cannot change anything. I think this is a lecture in Ukraine. We must be very honest with each other when we speak about this country. It is a failed state. We are not speaking about some things which can go on and there is some development and here. No, it is not. Ukraine is living 100%, we can say, from outside, from external transfers of help and money they needed. If the West would stop today paying Ukraine, this country would collapse. And it would collapse more than we saw the Soviet Union collapse. There would be nothing anymore.
Well, it seems that all developments rotate always around the Nord Stream 2 pipeline project, which is now almost in full operation. Now, Washington and many EU countries acting upon Washington's whims try to sabotage that ambitious German-Russian energy cooperation since long. Why do multiple US administrations insist that this pipeline is a Russian geopolitical project intended to divide Europe and weaken European energy security? What threats, Manoel, does this pipeline impose on the EU energy sector and the US?
It imposes on the energy sector not one single, slightly little threat. We have also to be here very straight and honest. We speak about a very ambitious economic project where all the economic arguments are only for this project. There is not one single economic argument against Nord Stream 2. All arguments we hear now since many years are arguments of political nature and arguments, and now it becomes really disgusting, and arguments of moralic nature. That the US say, if we do this project with Russia, then Putin has more money to go on war on others and tortures children and whatever. So that is right now the situation. We speak about an ambitious economic project, which is very good, not just for Germany, by the way. I mean, Germany is one of the main countries, but 5 European countries agreed to this project. It is a legal agreed project, and the United States are of course against this project because it will bring Europe and in its center Germany closer to Russia. It will cause of course a closer energy cooperation, which comes to an economic cooperation, which will also come to a political cooperation, cultural cooperation. It will us bring to each other. The United States are against it. What are they doing for this? Again, as we said already about Ukraine, they are not just going themselves putting a foot in the door to be against it. No, they motivate the Baltic states, they motivate Poland to protest against it. But after all, it violates, of course, the US interest, which wants to be the master in Europe. One last sentence, please allow me, because it will explain everything.
Go ahead.
Lord Ismay, the first General Secretary of NATO, was once asked, what are the aims of NATO? And he answered in one sentence, it is to keep the Americans in, to keep the Germans down, and to keep the Russians out of Europe. And you see
with this sentence, I don't want to end this comment, but we have to stop for a short break, Manoel.
Okay.
But we're going to discuss what Lord Lionel Ismay said about this particular issue, but after the break. إذا فاصل قصير ونعود، لا تذهبوا بعيدا. أهلا بكم من جديد. مانويل أوكزنرايتر, German journalist and director of the German Center for Eurasian Studies. Welcome back, Manoel. Well, 7 years ago and still today, the Ukrainian topic, including Crimea, is a big elephant in the room of German-Russian relations. But this topic is mainly fueled by Washington. Can we say that the Anglo-Saxon policy to create a split between Germany and Russia to prevent any terms of closer relations or cooperation whatsoever didn't change within the last 120 years and more?
Absolutely not, and I'm very thankful and very grateful that you put now the example of Crimea and Ukraine, because if we look on a map, if we look on the German history and on the Russian history, we can say if Crimea belongs today to the Russian Federation or not doesn't affect the German interests at all. It is simply not our business. It would become our business if Russia would, for example, start meddling in the center of Europe when it comes to our own interests, to our own territory. But that is not Russia which is meddling there. It's the United States of America which is active there. So just saying, we have a policy that there is an artificial opposition, an artificial fight between Germany and Russia about topics which are under normal conditions, not topics of any conflict between Germany and Russia. Again, what happened in Crimea, it was not causing any negative consequences for Germany. The only negative consequences what Germany has, just saying, these are the imposed sanctions against Russia. German business cannot make any business with Crimea like all the other European business and so on. So the negative effects which came with it, which really violate, for example, our economic interests, they are imposed not by Russia, they are imposed by the European Union and by the United States of America.
Now, Germany has accused Russia of, to add to all this, they have accused Russia of ordering the murder of a man killed in Tiergarten Park in Berlin back in 2019. And also, the Navalny case is a non-stop issue used to create problems and trouble between Europe and Germany on the one side and Russia on the other. Also to sabotage, as we said, the energy cooperation. Also interesting in this case, nobody, Manoel, demands the stop of energy cooperation with Saudi Arabia, despite of the incident with the appalling, abominable killing of Saudi journalist Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. This shows clearly that it is not about ethics or morals or values, but rather about geopolitics.
Absolutely. This is why I used before the term of disgust, that they use a disgusting morals. Morals becomes in the moment disgusting when it is really openly, when you can openly see that it is a hypocrite moral. And we see it exactly there. Nobody ever demanded that we stop the import of resources from Saudi Arabia. I mean, even before that assassination of the Saudi journalist in Turkey, we have there an autocratic, backwarded Stone Age regime, which is not just oppressing its own citizens, it's also oppressing around its own territory. We have its involvement in the Yemen war. I mean, if we start now talking about Saudi Arabia, we would need maybe 10 shows just to make a list about what this country is doing. But, and that is, by the way, a thing where I agree to, when it comes to our own interest. And Germany is a country which is highly industrialized. We are maybe the last really industrialized country in whole Europe. It is not just a financial market like the UK, for example, but we are a country which produces things which are very much demanded in other parts of the world. So we have a very, very big energy hunger while not having resources. We must secure the diversity of our energy imports. And for this, nobody has the right to tell Germany or the German energy providers where they take it from. And we can simply not afford to ask for every importer or for every import country what they did within the last 100 years. If we start doing this, then we will start hacking our own woods and burn our wood for getting the energy. So that is the point, but you were absolutely right. When it comes to Russia, we have completely other standards than when it comes to Saudi Arabia, what absolutely shows that we are neither speaking about ethics or morals, that we 100% speak about geopolitics.
Right. Allow me to come back to your remark before the break, what you said about NATO's first Secretary General, Lord Lionel Ismay, who said upon the creation of the NATO in the 1950s, the ultimate aim of this foundation is to keep the Americans in Europe, to keep Germans down, to keep the Soviet Union or the Russians out? Elaborate more, Manoel, please.
Yes, I mean, we have to be thankful to Lord Ismay that he was putting all this big complex alliance into a nutshell and formulated that sentence, because this sentence is not just like a historical product we can study today. This is the matrix of Western policy until today. The forms might look different. It is not anymore to keep Germany down in terms of to keep it poor or totally dependent, but it is to keep Germany dependent in its political sovereignty. Germany is not a politically sovereign country. We might be very strong economically, but just one example shows now is the Nordstream example. Whenever we do a decision on our own behalf or on the base of our own interest, and the Americans don't like this, then they threaten us with sanctions and with other bad stuff. So we see keeping Germany down is today meant keeping Germany politically totally dependent and keeping the Russians or the Soviets out. There, nothing changed within the last 70 years.
Right. Well, it seems that today Berlin is acting on behalf of Washington's commands and demands and expectations, as you said, not on behalf of European and German interests. To what extent does this kind of liaison also have an effect on German relations with other countries, such as Iran, for example, and the JCPOA negotiations, or even Syria today?
Well, Iran is a very good example because Germany could do, well, that is now very important, we could do much more business and much more in deeper economic relations with the Islamic Republic of Iran. It is legal. It is not threatened or harmed by any kind of sanctions or embargoes if we would do this. We are still not doing this, mainly because we have there the Israeli power, and via the United States, of course, also the Israeli influence, telling us not to do this. So we ask for the extent. I tell you, the extent is that we have a kind of preemptive obedience in Germany, that we have a political class which is raised by the preemptive obedience. It is the kind of obedience that you get something offered, what is very good for you and very good for the other side which offers it to you, and you don't think, how do we implement this business? You think, but how will they think in Washington and Tel Aviv about that if I do that? That is preemptive obedience. So to this extent goes the dependency, the political dependency of Germany. And for me as a German, of course, it is, I suffer to see that, because we could do many more things. And you mentioned Syria, the same what Lord Ismay said about Germany in his NATO sentence about Europe, he would say today when it comes to Syria also, to keep for the Middle East, to keep the Americans in, to keep the Syrians down, and to keep the Russians out, and the Iranians also out. So that would perfectly fit also for that region.
Sure. Manoel Oxenreiter, German journalist and director of the German Center for Eurasian Studies. Thank you very much for your piercing analysis and thoughts. Always a pleasure to have you, Manoel. Bless you and be safe.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Shukran.
Most welcome. أهلا وسهلا. وشكرا لكم مشاهدينا الكرام على طيب المتابعة. للتفاعل أكثر تابعونا على صفحات السوشيال ميديا، وحتى نلتقي من كل فريق عمل من الداخل من كل الميادين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.